So I want to talk a little bit about culture. We're going to just do a little bit of an introduction to some basic concepts here, a little bit of an overview, and then later in the module we'll get a little further into some of the more fine points of culture. But let's start with an overview. Um, when sociologists talk about culture, what they're talking about are the ways of thinking, the ways of feeling, the ways of acting that characterize a society or a group. Culture is learned, it's transmitted and sustained and transformed through interaction and communication. Like structure, one of the other determinants of social organization, culture can often be very, very hard to see. So, one of the things that helps us see culture is moments and situations where we're taken out of culture or given a perspective on it from um, the revelation that comes through, say, for example, a shocking discovery. So, there are two ways to think about culture. And both of these are, although they seem to contradict one another, they are both simultaneously true. One of those paradoxes that sort of seems to characterize a lot of sociology. So the two ways to think about culture are that it is a product of action and that it is a conditioning element of future action. And let me explain what that means. So when we talk about culture as a product of action, what we mean is that culture is created by human activity. When we interact together in patterned ways, when we create shared meaning, that is the creation of culture. So we make culture, and we often make culture in response to material conditions. So cultures in societies characterized by scarcity will be different than cultures that emerge in societies that are characterized by abundance. That cultures can change in a society in response to material conditions as a country goes from a racially or ethnically homogenous makeup to a multiracial or multi-ethnic makeup, the culture of that society changes or can change accordingly. So the adaptation to material conditions leads to the creation of cultural patterns, among other things. So that's what we mean when we talk about culture as a product of action. It is something that we create. Culture as a conditioning element of future action is, in essence, a way of saying that culture guides our behavior. Culture shapes the things we do, which, again, you can kind of see the paradox there, right? That culture is a product of the things that we do, but it also is shaping the things that we do. So that again, you don't need to resolve that contention or that paradox, but obviously you want to recognize it and you want to be somewhat comfortable with it. When we think about culture from this perspective, we can see the way in which culture shapes the behavior of people within a society or the people within a culture by guiding their understandings, among other things, guiding their understandings of the society around them. So Max Weber very famously studied the impact of culture on the emergence of capitalism in societies characterized by Protestantism. His argument was that in those societies, particular cultural features that were specific to Protestantism, thrift and industry and hard work, a view of occupations as a calling, a belief in predestination, and things of that nature, led to a particular, that were specific to a particular kind of religion, were also consistent with the kinds of ethics or values that were associated with this newly emerging economic system in the 1500s called capitalism. And so societies like Germany and England that were characterized by Protestant faith saw a more rapid emergence and um, adoption of capitalism than societies like France or Spain that were predominantly Catholic and had a different set of cultural ethics in place. And very famously writes about this. Weber writes about this in a book published in 1905 called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. So both of those things are true about culture. You, as I said, do not need to worry about resolving any potential paradox there. But it is, again, useful to recognize that both of those aspects of culture are true. So when we think about culture, one of the things that we have a tendency to do is to divide it up into what we call material culture and non-material culture. Material culture is the stuff that we make, right? The things that we create or the things that we adapt from the raw material of nature. So, imagine, an early hominid picking up a rock, right, from the side of the trail and using it as a tool to kill an animal or to skin a bit, peel the bark off of a piece of wood, or any other sort of alteration. That rock has gone from just being a rock to being a tool, right? And it's the act of using it in a particular way that makes it a tool. Nothing about the rock has actually changed except the meaning that is attached to it and the use to which it is put. Now, in our case, because we're going to be looking more often than not at modern society, we're really thinking about the stuff that we make. So all the modern technology you see around us, the clothing, the technology, the buildings, the art, the media, right? All of that stuff is material culture. It's the stuff that the tangible stuff. Non-material culture, which is the other category of culture, consists of intangible elements of culture. I think this is where most of the really interesting aspects of culture, for our purposes, where most of the interesting aspects of culture are going to lie. And there are 5 categories of non-material culture. There are symbols, language, norms, values, and beliefs. Again, symbols, language, norms, values, and beliefs. Those are the 5 categories of non-material culture. They are interconnected. Most especially, there's a really strong connection between symbols and language. There is also a really strong connection between norms and values. And then beliefs are just, again, connected to all of these things, but sort of operating in a way that kind of cuts across all of them. So a symbol is a word or a gesture or an object that has shared meaning for 2 or more people. So symbols are kind of a proxy. They're a stand-in. They represent something else. And we'll talk more about these symbols in the next lecture. Language is sort of an organized system of symbols that we use for communication and for representation. So we take sort of the individual symbolic meaning of the various objects in our society, groups of sounds or particular patterns of ink or graphite or something on a page, and we organize that into an organized system of symbols that we call language. So symbols and language, you can see, are always kind of interconnected in that fashion. Norms and values are also interconnected. Norms are the socially accepted rules of behavior. They are the patterns of behavior that people engage in. Values are the shared underlying ideas about what's good, desirable, or correct. So a value gives rise to a norm, right? So the norms, the things that we do, the behaviors we engage in, presumably reflect the things that we feel are important or desirable, the values. So in our society, for example, we might say that gratitude is a value. Well, the presence of that value in our society leads to an established pattern of behavior or a norm, which would maybe say, for example, involve saying thank you. If somebody gets you a gift for your birthday, you express that verbally or in some other way by saying thank you, acknowledging the gift. Well, the underlying motivation for that is this value that gratitude and appreciation are important. So the value is always going to be revealed by the norm. And then finally, beliefs. Again, beliefs are people's ideas about what is or is not real. They sort of intersect with and incorporate elements of all of those other aspects of culture, but in many ways, beliefs operate at a level or in a way that's somewhat independent of these other elements of culture, because these other elements of culture, I think, are more easily connected to underlying material conditions, whereas beliefs are sort of transcendent. We probably, in this class, will probably not spend a lot of time on beliefs, but beliefs are kind of an undercurrent that become very, very important in a society overall, because beliefs can often lead to particular interpretations or manifestations of other elements of culture. As I said, we're going to spend more time in the next lecture talking about symbols and to a certain extent language, but symbols and language are going to be very, very important for the kind of stuff that we're going to be doing in social psychology going forward. So that's where we'll pick up next time. So until then, take care.